T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. All three engines up and burning. 2, 1, 0, and liftoff.
One of the most horrifying things I had ever seen on a nature program was a shot of snakes in a reproductive orgy. The show was all about snakes in general and covered snakes doing their normal snaky things and so on, but then the how snakes make more snakes part became what shall forever after be known in my family as the writhing pile of snakes. For that is exactly what it was. Snakes from all parts of the territory arriving in a central location and snaking into a nasty pile, and somehow that made more snakes. I will admit I did not catch all the details due to the state of abject horror I was in, and for which my family still mocks me anytime a nature program cares to show how critters make more critters. Oh, look, Dad, it's writhing pile of snakes time. Well, dear listener, we have no such reproductive horror to share today. Citizens of Tech only brings you the bits of the world we think will inspire and interest you. And to that end, I, Ethan Banks at EC Banks on Twitter, and Eric Zutphen at Zutphen with a Z on Twitter, are here with another podcast of Tech Love. Eric, what is on the agenda for today's show?
Tech love. I love it. So today we start off here with Kickstarter hiring a journalist to probe the implosion of the most funded project in the history of Kickstarter. So this is a mini drone manufacturing project by a company called Zano. They raised $3.5 million for these mini drones that they had this swarm capability so that you could have a swarm of them basically coordinate for special camera shots and things like this. But the company kind of blew up. It just sort of imploded. I guess that's the opposite of blew up, but it's not a thing anymore, is what I'm trying to say, Ethan. So Kickstarter is hiring a journalist named Mark Harris to investigate what happened. And so the question is, where did all the money go? And it really boils down to $3.5 million isn't as much money as it sounds, although that is a lot of money for a Kickstarter project. Turns out that the manufacturing costs were poorly researched, so they didn't really go in fully educated about how much this was going to cost to manufacture these things. And they couldn't make the drone for the expected cost, which is, oops. So they had over 12,000 backers. And the bad news is, if you're one of those 12,000 plus backers, you're probably not getting your money back. It's gone. It's been spent. You're done.
Well, what's interesting here is that Kickstarter hired a journalist, Mark Harris is his name, to investigate this. They didn't send in the cops or anything. In other words, nothing illegal happened. It's just Zano blew it. Whatever they did, I guess manufacturing costs being what they are, they couldn't get the project done. You'd think they would have figured that out before the $3.5 million was, gone.
Completely exhausted, yeah.
And maybe sent some money back to backers and said, guys, we're sorry, we suck. But
we're going to give back 60%, or yeah. We spent $2 million, and we don't want to spend this last $1.5 million, so we're going to give that back. No, spent it all.
So what Mark Harris comes up with will be interesting. I'd love to know the rest of the story. I mean, Kickstarter's doing what it can to kind of shed some light on this thing.
Yeah.
They are... I mean, don't you kind of trust Kickstarter? Oh, cool. But, I mean, Kickstarter's not... They're just a middleman. They're the facilitator for the project. They're putting a website out there that you can advertise your project and attract money, and then, Kickstart...
Yeah.
Whatever piece of it that they take, it's a pretty small amount. But they're not the ones doing the project. They're just not even an incubator. They're just a way to let the world know what's going on. So they're doing what they can, and I think you could even argue they're going above and beyond the Call of Duty, trying to figure this thing out.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, there's the risks section on any of these Kickstarter pages. Hey, there is a risk here that you could give us money, and we're going to take it, and you're not going to get, diddly squat for it. So just, investor beware, I guess.
Well, let's move the conversation along to some talk of weather. And Eric and I are located in the northeast corner of the United States in a small state called New Hampshire. So those of you international folks and people in flyover country and so on that, the northeast U.S. is not something you're familiar with, pull out your globes and put your finger on New Hampshire. That's where we are. And it's winter. And it's really warm.
Yeah. Not so much wintry.
No, not at all. It's been really quite warm. And there's a couple of stories that we found that address what the reason is. One, incredibly strong El Nino, Ars Technica tells us. Incredibly strong El Nino developing brings a surge of winter warmth. And so the big idea here is that if you look out to the equator, that middle line that goes around the globe, and check out the Pacific Ocean. It's really warm right in that area, and a lot of that warm water is impacting the air, and air currents are taking that warm air up across North America, and thus we've got a lot of warm air. So let me read a quote here from the Ars Technica article. They say, of the metrics used to gauge the strength of El Nino, the most straightforward is to look at temperatures between 90 degrees west and 160 degrees east longitude and 5 degrees north and 5 degrees south of the equator, known as the Nino 3.4 region. Back on November 16th, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration reported that this area of the Pacific had a weekly average temperature that was 3.0 degrees Celsius above normal, a record high, topping the 2.8 degrees Celsius anomaly recorded during the week of November 26th, 1997, almost 20 years ago, the last really strong El Nino. And again, the result is super warm in the U.S. And Eric, we can testify, man, there's... I hike up in the mountains, and even at elevation in the mountains, there's very little snow and ice. I mean, I've had to put on micro spikes to walk around safely on a few trails, but mostly at elevation even, it's slushy and just kind of messy. No snow. The ski areas are done. Not done. They haven't even started. I mean, a few of them tried to open, but
it's been like 50 degrees. Which is highly unusual. It's funny when you mention the November 26, 1997 El Nino, it instantly made me think back to Saturday Night Live with Chris Farley. I don't know if you ever saw that skit. I'm not going to belabor it if you haven't seen it. It doesn't sound like you've seen it, but
I've not seen that one.
I am El Nino. All other tropical storms must bow before El Nino. Yo soy El Nino. For those of you who don't habla español, El Nino is Spanish for the Nino.
He's trying to explain, what El Nino does to the weather system and all that. Anyhow,
well, beyond El Nino, the Nino, there is more reasons more observations that the weather scientists have made about what's going on in the world right now. Another story here, this one coming from the Washington Post, reports that November was the Earth's warmest such month on record by a huge margin. And this is not a big surprise. I mean, science has been tracking this for the year, and they knew with a pretty high degree of certainty that 2015 was going to be the warmest year that we've ever measured. That's different from the warmest year that there's ever been on the Earth. It's just the warmest we've ever measured. We've only been measuring for a very, like the last 100-odd years or so. So the margin stands now at 1.05 degrees Celsius or 1.9 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than the 1951 to 1980 average that they're using as a baseline. The previous record was 0.97 degrees Celsius. So, yeah, the El Nino we were talking about is a big deal.
But it's more than just that, right?
Oh, it is more than just that. So here's a quote from the Washington Post article. They say the Pacific Ocean was not the warmest region of the globe in November. Much of the warmth measured by NASA emanated from the Arctic, where temperatures were running anywhere from 4 to 10 degrees Celsius, that's 7 to 18 degrees Fahrenheit, above average. So let's go into some citizens of tech, speculation and wild, imaginings of what's going on here, because I think. While it's very clear that the Earth is getting warmer, I mean, all you got to do if you go to citizensofTech.com, find show 21, and look at the Washington Post link, there's a bunch of graphs in there that show you the trends over the last few years. It's up and to the right. I mean, it's not subtle. It's not like, well, it was down this year and up the next year. No, it's just continuing to rise, the average global temperature. The warming is happening, but I don't think we know of a certainty what the root cause is. It's because we all drive cars, man. And, well, it isn't as simple as that. I mean, because there's been historical Earth warming and cooling trends throughout geologic time. They take ice cores out of Antarctica, for example, and they can tell a lot of what's gone on for many thousands of years back, well before we human beings started burning fossil fuels. The current science does kind of suggest, though, that we keep burning combustibles to make energy and that we use to turn into locomotion, cars and so on, and electricity. That does seem to be a factor. I don't know if it's the only factor.
Well, we're certainly not helping, I think, is the bottom line.
If we're not helping, or if we're not the only ones that are causing the global warming problem that we see, can we, if we change our ways, fix the problem is what I'm wondering about. Let's say, Eric, we change to wind power, solar power, geothermal, et cetera, all renewable energy sources, and we quit burning things, coal and oil and whatever else. Does that, we all have electric cars and, all our energy is completely green across the whole planet. I mean, we're extremely far from that. But let's say we did that. Would that reverse the global warming trend?
Certainly not instantly. I mean, it's going to take some serious time for that to recover. But, from my limited research, it looks like, yes, ultimately it would, but it's not going to be, in 50 years or 100 years. It's going to be a slow, steady crawl for a recovery on that.
I'm not 100% convinced of that. Do I think it would help if we stop, putting CO2 into the air? Well, obviously, yeah, it's going to help. Is it going to solve the problem or fix the, this trend, this warming trend? We're saying it's a problem largely because of rising oceans. I think is one of the bigger challenges we're facing with a warming Earth. But the Earth has gone through, I think, 10,000 years ago in this area that we live right now, Eric. It was covered with a sheet of ice. So. And it's warmed since then, well before we had much impact on it. So I think with the Earth's natural heating and cooling cycles, maybe there are factors to it that we don't understand thoroughly yet and are beyond our control.
Very well may be. I guess at the end of the day, my angle on it is if we're doing as much as we can to limit our impact as a society, then what will be, and we'll have to adapt. But we can only speculate to some degrees. You're right.
Yeah, and I guess I'm not trying to make the point of, well, I don't know if we can fix it all, so screw it, burn everything. I'm not going
Let's
there
set some
either.
oil barrels on fire.
Aren't there some tires out back we can?
But it's the what extent, right? I get what you're saying.
Yeah, I do believe that we should be responsible with our energy consumption and understanding where that energy comes from, which actually is an interesting topic as relates to electric cars. So I know you've done a lot of digging into electric cars. A few months back, we went up to the Alternate Energy Summit that was held up at Mount Washington in New Hampshire and looked at a lot of e-vehicles. But an electric car by itself is not green, right?
No, because you're mining heavy minerals out of the earth. heavy metals, rather, out of the earth to make the batteries.
And that's just one piece of it. The electricity that when you plug the car into the wall, that electricity's got to come from somewhere. What energy source generated that power? I saw this great little cartoon that popped up on Twitter that showed a coal power plant way off in the background, feeding the electric lines of this person. There was an outlet on the pole, and the guy had plugged his car in, and he was going all proud of himself because of his green, clean car.
Yeah.
Not exactly.
Yeah, I mean, you can break that down a little bit and say, to produce the amount of electricity, yeah, even if you're burning coal, as long as it's a coal plant that is within, federal regulations for emissions, it's going to be a lot cleaner than, 100 people burning gasoline or, wherever the breakdown is.
But it's a whole different thing from wind power, solar.
Oh, yeah. Oh, hands down. Yes. No question about it.
Well, we should move into some first world challenges.
Yeah, so
you found this story about the Volcari clip.
Yeah, the Volcari clip. Anyone out there that has an iPad Pro, which I do not, but when I looked at the iPad Pro, you look at it and you just go, it's, that's a great looking device. I've never held one, but I hear it's a little bulky, whatever, but it's a nice device. It comes with the Apple Pencil, right?
I think it's an add-on, but yeah, that's the device that works with the pencil.
Yeah, you don't strictly have to use it, but they say, people that have it say, oh, well, this changes things. So the really odd thing with the iPad Pro Pencil or Apple Pencil is that charging it means you have to stick it into the lightning connector on the bottom of the iPad Pro. So it's sort of sticks out like a lollipop stick. And it's just so not elegant like you would expect from an Apple product, I guess, is the first thing that popped into my head. Well, instead of sticking the Apple Pencil into the lightning port, you can instead clip on the Volcari clip, which is a conductive charging dock for the Apple Pencil. So it plugs into the lightning connector instead. And then the Apple Pencil actually sits inside of it, sort of the way that I expected the charging to happen, where it's parallel with the lower line of the iPad.
And it's conductive. You don't have to even plug the thing in. You just nestle it in the little dock.
Yeah, you pop the Apple Pencil into it and it's charging. Yeah. It makes a lot of sense. It gets around the aesthetic and, impracticality of sticking the Apple Pencil directly into the lightning port, I guess. So they're currently on Indiegogo. You can get these as an early bird buyer for £35. So this is obviously a UK outfit here. They're supposed to ship by May of 2016. So it's milled aluminum. You plug it into the bottom, you stick your Apple Pencil in there, and it does the conductive charging. It's kind of a cool idea, I think. What's your...
It's not. I'm not down with this
thing.
So okay, I wrote a little thing about this because this just kind of got me wound up. So here's my take on this Volcari clip. You got a new iPad Pro? You got one of those Apple Pencils, and aren't they beautiful? And yes, it is. Okay, so charging the pencil, as you said, means shoving it into the lightning connector on the bottom of your iPad Pro, and that is so clunky. There is no way you can groove ironically to Bon Iver while all that's going on. It's just not hipster at all. And dare we say not Apple at all. And now Volcari to the rescue. You can now shove a conductive charging pencil dock into your iPad Pro's lightning connector instead. So elegant, so color matched. You seen that meme with the dog? Yeah, it's that. So able to route sound through the little portals. So able to make your unwieldy iPad Pro even bigger. And yeah, or my take is realize that you get 12 hours of life with the pencil, and with a 15-second charge, you get another 30 minutes of use, and then move on with your life, ironically, if you must. So I'm just not, I don't know, man. I think we're really reaching for this. Yes, it was elegant, but I was like, is there really a need for this thing? I don't know.
Well, I don't specifically have a need, as I will probably never own an iPad Pro, but I thought it was a relatively clever thing. I didn't realize it was going to get your hackles in it.
Here at Citizens of Tech, we are all about diversity of opinion.
I didn't realize that the Volcari clip was a writhing pile of snakes, Ethan.
Hey, let it go. You don't need to bring that up again.
Anyway, you can follow the link and check it out.
Sponge injection could save the lives of domestic gunshot victims.
This sounds like a terrible idea.
This is a pretty interesting thing. What? Come on. This is a cool idea. So you know how in Star Trek when there's a hull breach that they will apply the shields over the hull as a temporary patch until the damage can repair properly? Sure. Yeah, this is like that, only for gunshot wounds. Did you you read about this, right?
Yep. It's just the headline sounded terrible. That's all. So they're calling this thing XStat, right? Which I'm sure, stat. It's a medical term. We need this quickly. Anyhow, the idea is to deploy 92 little sponges that can soak up blood via a syringe, but it's not like a needle. There's no needle on the syringe. It's more like a plunger.
Yeah.
And the sponges can handle up to a pint of blood, which is quite a bit of blood, actually. And they fill in the wound as they expand. So they're soaking up blood, and it expands to fill the wound, which basically is an artificial clot. And it does act as that temporary patch that increases a gunshot victim's chance of survival while they're en route to an actual medical facility. And the interesting thing I thought were the statistics that they had. You want to run down the stats?
So if you're wondering if this is a big deal, yeah, these stats do kind of corroborate that this sponge technology is a big deal. They say, to quote the Ars Technica article, about 30 to 40% of civilians who die from traumatic injuries do so because of blood loss, according to the U.S. Army Institute of Surgical Research. Of those deaths, up to 56% occur before the wounded patients make it to an emergency room. Wow. Oh, and by the way, in case you're worried, like, oh, that sounds really cool, but I don't want one of 92 little sponges left inside me because I've heard horrible stories about people in surgery and things being left inside. Well, each sponge contains an X-ray detectable marker to ensure that no sponges are left behind.
They thought of everything.
It's really cool technology.
It really
I like
is. I was just busting your chops at the beginning. It's super cool. Okay, so on to some space news. Astronomers are questioning the claim of a superplanet found at the solar system's edge. This does come to us from Ars Technica, the astronomy section. And so there's a theory out there that there is something beyond the orbit of Neptune and Pluto. And the question is it a superplanet or Planet X? Most astronomers don't think so. Two new papers posit, quote, a massive object at the edge of the solar system using observations from the Atacama Large Submillimeter Array in Chile during 2014 and 2015. The astronomers spied a new black body point source that appears to be moving in conjunction with the Alpha Centauri star system about 4.3 light years from Earth. The authors do not believe the new object is part of the Alpha Centauri system, however, because if it were that far away, such a star would have been bright enough to be seen before. So the question is, what is it and what's it orbiting? There's another quote here. Perhaps most notably, they suggest a super-Earth at a distance of about 300 astronomical units from the sun, or about 6 times further than Pluto is at its aphelion. Another explanation is a super cool brown dwarf, too big to be a planet, too small to be a star, at about 20,000 astronomical units from the sun. So, for reference, an astronomical unit is the distance from the Earth to the sun, so 93 million miles, whatever that is in
okay, so I was listening to that quote where you describe a super Earth at a distance of 300 AUs or a super cool brown dwarf at 20,000 AUs. Are they just making it up? It sounds like they're shooting from the hip.
Well, it could be this, or it could be something completely different. It's this that's relatively
right. Those are not the same things, and the distances are not close. At all.
No, I mean we're talking about a factor of 100 almost in distances.
So at the end of this article, they quoted a guy, Mike Brown.
Yeah.
And here, just to read the article, this guy he's not down with this theory that posited in these reports at all. So the Ars Technica says he is a prominent planetary scientist at the California Institute of Technology, and his specialization is the outer solar system. And so he says, fun fact, if it is true that ALMA accidentally discovered a massive outer solar system object in its tiny, tiny, tiny field of view, that would suggest that there are something like, 200,000 Earth-sized planets in the outer solar system, which, no. Even better, I just realized that this many Earth-sized planets existing would destabilize the entire solar system, and we would all die.
So there's that. Yeah.
Go Mike Brown at the California Institute of Technology.
That is an awesome quote, I gotta say. So I recently was reading about and actually saw a YouTube video about a theory of what has been termed the wandering Jupiter, where they believe that Jupiter actually had a starkly different orbit at one time and swept through the inner solar system and basically could represent an alternate explanation why our solar system is so weird astronomically speaking, with no inner planets closer than Mercury and all that. That sort of, based on my reading, it seems a little more realistic than this, like you had said, shooting from the hip. It might be a brown dwarf star really far from the sun, or it could be a big Earth that's kind of close. I don't know,
man. I don't know.
But yeah, I love the quote.
I love the thought of thinking that there might be something further out there beyond Pluto. It's kind of cool, but I just, I wish they knew. so here's the thing. We always think about science as like having the answers and knowing. And yet the more of these articles I read, the more you realize that so much of science is just trying to figure out the data. They don't know. It's all about research and corroboration and theorizing and trying things.
This is what we see.
Yeah.
Now can we figure out what it means?
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, and if you're in Tokyo and you look up in the sky, you might see drones fighting drones. So here's yet another Ars Technica article. Tokyo's drone squad will deploy 10-foot drones armed with nets to police the sky.
Whoa.
The whole thing here, this is drones hunting drones.
It's like
More
Spy
specifically,
Hunter.
well, yeah,
Drone
and
hunter.
it's the Tokyo police that are dealing with this. Massive 10-foot drones with nets attached, controlled by the Tokyo police, going after unauthorized drones in city no-fly zones. Which you're like, why is that a thing that they be deploying drones? And it's a thing, and to quote the article, earlier this year, a 40-year-old Japanese man admitted he landed an unmanned drone carrying radioactive sand atop Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's office in an effort to protest nuclear power. No one was injured in the stunt.
Who hasn't done that? I mean,
Yeah,
I
really.
call that Tuesday,
Oh, well, I mean, I kind of get the protest because of the whole Fukushima disaster. I read a lot of the details of that disaster back when it happened. There was a paper that was published that had a lot of interesting data around it and the effect it had and so on. Fascinating stuff. So I get why there's a protest, but still, air robot wars in Japan. I mean, when do we get mechs? I want mechs.
That's the real news bit here, right?
Yeah,
Just air
exactly.
robot wars in Japan. Yeah.
Well, as we get close to the end of the show here, we got a few more little details to share with you folks. One, content I like. So those of you that know me from the Packet Pushers podcasting world know I'm a bit of an IT nerd, as is Eric. That is our day job and how we pay the bills. So there's a YouTube channel called SentDex, SentDex. If you look for SentDex, SentDex, or go up to citizensoftech.com, look at the show notes. I've got a link right through to the channel. You will find a channel that is jammed full of video tutorials, mostly about Python. So if you're interested in programming, learning how to do programming, Python's not a bad way to get started. It's a pretty accessible language. It's available on a lot of different platforms. And the SentDex channel covers all sorts of Python-related stuff and some other things too, but I mean, most of the content there is about Python. And it's endless. You couldn't possibly keep up with all the content, so you kind of just dive into the bits that are interesting to you. He covers a lot of real-world applications of Python. So, for example, he's got a series on data visualization. He's got a series on OpenGL. He's got one on machine learning. He's got one on how to interact with the Flask web framework, robotics, like doing stuff with the Raspberry Pi and robotics and stuff. And that is just what I spotted on the channel landing page. I mean, you start digging through there is so much content that's so good, and it's free. I mean, it's extraordinary. Again, the SentDex channel on YouTube is definitely worth checking out.
So you're saying it's mostly about Python and it's a huge pile, so it's a writhing pile of snakes.
Oh, you did it again. I actually did not see that coming. Wow. Well, Eric, my friend, did you learn anything today?
I did. Today I learned that astronauts have to sleep near a ventilator fan or they risk suffocating in a bubble of their own exhaled carbon dioxide. Can you imagine?
What a thing. Who would have thought? Yeah, no natural air currents up there, yeah.
Right. So you're just exhaling and, sometimes they'll wake up gasping for breath. Or I guess ultimately you could maybe not wake up, which wouldn't, be such a good thing.
No.
So,
I learned something too. I learned that there are at least 10 basic types of clouds. This comes from a NOAA website page. So 10 basic types of clouds in 3 classes, high, middle, and low. So starting with high, we've got cirrus, cirrostratus, and cirrocumulus. At the mid layer, we've got altostratus, altocumulus, and nimbostratus. And then low, we've got cumulus, stratus, cumulonimbus, and stratocumulus clouds. Now, I'll tell you, that is the 10 basic types of clouds. Basic. If you start digging in, there are so many more. It is crazy. And hiking nerds kind of get into this. Oh, you're standing on a ridgeline looking at clouds. I think that's a lenticular blah, blah, cloud. Oh, really? Just, you knew that? Okay. But
it's a cloud.
It's fluffy and there's water
That's me.
inside.
It's a cloud.
Yeah. Well, everyone, that is all for today's Citizens of Tech podcast. You can follow Citizens of Tech in all sorts of ways, including Twitter and Facebook. And if you want to know how exactly to do that, head on over to citizensoftech.com to find the details. And remember, if you get your tongue stuck to a frozen flagpole, you did it to yourself. Don't call us. We are totally not going to help. Well, I mean, if you promise to tell your friends about Citizens of Tech, then yeah.